Hello and welcome to Trusts and Estates Weekly. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we are here every Monday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time to talk about matters relating to estate planning, trust and probate administration, both from the standpoint of handling your own financial matters and for professionals who are involved in helping you do that, or professionals who are considering getting involved in this arena. So today, our topic is for primarily, I would say, young adults, for people who are really just starting out in life, maybe recently got out of college, or they're out of high school and they're in their first job, um, may not be married yet, don't have children yet, that sort of thing, and and as a result, may not think that they have anything to be concerned about in this arena. And so I'm going to talk about a number of issues that even for people who are just starting out, they probably need to take a look at. So there you are. If you're just starting out, right? Trusts and Estates Weekly. So let's jump right in. And of course, everything we do on the Way to Wow shows relates to the three pillars of attainment. We're dealing here in the finances section as we, finances realm of the pursuits pillar as we normally do. All right. So, no spouse, no family, no house. Just starting out, that's probably the case. It may be, like I said, you just recently got out of college, you're starting your first job, or you're done with high school, you didn't go to college. But in fact, you're starting to make, some money now, but you don't have any major assets. So you may have a car, a few things like that. But for most people, a house is their major asset, and so you don't have a house yet, or maybe don't want one. Okay, so what is it that you have to be concerned about? Well, there may be several things. First of all, despite having no large assets, you may still have some small assets. Okay, you may have some bank accounts. You may have some valuable collectibles. If you collected comic books, if you collected, what do they call it? Different sort of fan items, action figures, those sorts of things. Some of those collections, while they may not be, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, or even in the high five figures, you may have a collection that's worth, who knows, 10, 20, $30,000. That's not insubstantial. And it's something that, you probably don't want just thrown away if you were to, unfortunately pass away. So, for those kinds of issues, you do want to do at least some basic estate planning. Now, you may say, well, wait a minute, I'm young, I'm healthy, I don't have to worry about dying. And yes, of course, the chances that you're going to die are very, very low. However, they're not zero. That's just the reality. And by the way, estate planning isn't only about planning for when we die. It is also planning for when we might become incapacitated. So if you engage in any kind of higher risk sports, skiing, snowboarding, those sorts of things, surfing, any of those, raise the risk that you might get injured in a way where you're no longer able to work, you're no longer able to take care of yourself. And so then, what's going to happen? So rather than leaving yourself at the mercy of whomever it is might step in to help you, whether it's your parents, whether it's a sibling, whether it's a significant other, girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever. You're well advised to give some thought to this and make some basic plans on what you want to happen. Okay, so in that vein, with respect to any property that you have, it's a good idea to have a will. Now, a will would, if your will has to be enacted, so to speak, it will require going through probate. Okay, that's a court action. Now, if you have a very small estate, then perhaps the probate won't cost very much. But it's better than leaving all of this to chance. And by the way, if you die without a will, as I've spoken about in other shows, if you die intestate, no will, no trust, no nothing, that doesn't mean that the court wouldn't get involved. The court may get involved. So let's say you've got that comic book collection or collectibles collection that's worth $30,000-$40,000. Okay, and now the people, maybe you have a couple of siblings and they never cared for comic books or collectibles, but they sure like the money, right? So what's going to happen? Well, it could be, if there's any kind of dispute, it's going to end up in court anyway. Okay, so by drawing up a will and naming who gets what, or just naming percentage shares to whomever you want to receive it, or specifically excluding someone from receiving any of the value of your estate. All of those can be put into a will. Pretty simple to draw up, not very expensive. And that way you can be reasonably assured that your wishes will be carried out after you die. You've taken the best step you can to avoiding a dispute between the people that you leave behind. Okay. So drawing up a simple will, a lot of times even paralegals can do it these days. There are forms online. I wouldn't necessarily say, if you're not familiar with these kinds of things, to do it yourself. But you could certainly draw something up yourself and then run it by a lawyer, just for a review to make sure everything is the way you wanted, and make sure you haven't inadvertently left something out or written up something incorrectly, so that it'll actually work differently than what you anticipate. Okay, so again, it can be a very inexpensive way to make sure the people you want to get the value of your estate get it, and for whatever reason those you don't. Okay, rather than leaving it up to the court and the state in which you live. Okay, next is an attorney in fact. They call this a power of attorney. The power of attorney is the document that appoints someone as your attorney in fact. That person has the authority to act on your behalf in a variety of issues. Okay, so if you become incapacitated, okay, not die. If you die, that cancels that cancels a power of attorney, and whoever was appointed is no longer your attorney in fact. But if you become incapacitated, the power of attorney can kick in, and that person then has the authority to make decisions and act on your behalf. Now, that can be a good thing, because you may not want a particular person to have authority over you, and or you may very much want a particular person to have that authority. So appointing an attorney in fact will do that for you, and it will sustain your wishes. Now, by the way, you can appoint an attorney in fact and an alternate. Okay, especially if you're appointing a parent. Okay, it's in the normal course of things, our parents predecease us. And so you may consider appointing someone as an alternative to a parent, especially if your parents are, a little more advanced in age. So, what can an attorney, in fact, do? Well, they can handle our financial matters. They can handle logistical matters, where we live, how we live, those kind of things. They can, sign a lease for us if we need to move into a different kind of living situation. All of those types of activities are things within an attorney's in fact prerogative. Of course, the power of attorney will uh, delineate what authority the attorney in fact has. Okay, generally speaking, it will say the attorney in fact can do these, and the attorney in fact cannot do these. Okay, if especially if there's something in particular you don't want the attorney in fact to be able to do, it should be specifically excluded. Otherwise, you're leaving it to interpretation. You're leaving it to chance. Okay, next is a healthcare directive. So again, if you're incapacitated in some way to the point where maybe you can't communicate your wishes, okay, maybe you're in a coma or something like that. So by leaving a healthcare directive, that will tell your family members, your loved ones, the people that are there helping you, as well as healthcare providers, what you want to have happen in this with respect to healthcare decisions. So, for example, if you're on life support and you don't want the proverbial plug pulled, well, you can put that in a healthcare directive, and that way these things aren't absolute, but in that way most likely you will be retained, and everything will be done to keep you alive. Okay. In order to get around that healthcare directive, there would the courts would have to be involved, and nonetheless, that healthcare directive will be strong evidence of what your wishes are. Okay, so a healthcare directive, it's kind of like a power of attorney. Oftentimes, it will appoint someone to make decisions on your behalf should you become incapacitated to the point where you're not able to make healthcare decisions. Okay, and in that case, I would recommend that whoever you appoint in the healthcare directive is someone who shares your values, or at least will make decisions in accordance with your values. Okay, and in order for the healthcare directive to be most effective. Okay, next, beneficiary designations. So if you have various assets, maybe you have some bank accounts, brokerage account, okay, you can oftentimes designate a beneficiary on death for those accounts. And in that way, you avoid going through probate. When you die, the person who's the designated beneficiary can contact the institution that's holding the account. Generally speaking, they'll have to present a death certificate showing that in fact you are deceased, and fill out some paperwork, and they'll become the owner of that account. And in that way, in most, if not all cases, they'll avoid going through probate. Okay. Now, this you can see that beneficiary designations kind of work hand in hand with a will. So you may put some things in a will and designate your beneficiaries in your will. Okay, other things won't go in your will because they'll pass outside of probate. Okay, and so those need to be coordinated. You may want to get some advice on these kind of things, especially rules specific to your state. Okay, but these are two ways of dealing with property that you have, to make sure it goes to the people that you want it to go to, or to the person you want it to go to, um, after you pass away. Okay, next group. Here we go. All right. You may want to consider carrying some life insurance. Now, if you have no spouse, you have no family, you have no house, there's no one who is financially reliant on you, so it may be that you don't really need a lot of life insurance. On the other hand, there are the costs of burial. There may be costs associated with wrapping up your affairs, and you may not want that cost to fall on whoever is the executor in your will, or you may not want them to fall on your attorney in fact, or the person designated in your healthcare directive. And so you may create a life insurance policy and name those people as your beneficiary to see to it that they have the resources that are necessary in order to handle your affairs when you're gone. For example, your burial. You see these commercials all the time. I think, what does it say? It costs a minimum of $10,000 to conduct a funeral, or whatever the number is. The bottom line is it's not expensive. And in a city like Los Angeles, where there's less and less available cemetery space, the cost of a cemetery plot can be very high. And so what's happening here in LA is people are going farther and farther away from the city in order to intern their loved ones. And there's a cost to that as well, because if people want to visit your gravesite, they're farther away, and it's harder for them to do that. I know my father is buried in a military cemetery in the Inland Empire. It's about an hour's drive, maybe a little bit more, for me to get there, and it's very difficult for me to do that. With all the various responsibilities that I have, it makes me sad, because I would like to go visit his gravesite more often. It's too difficult because he's so far away. So these are all things to consider, and they may necessitate your buying even a small life insurance policy. Now, if you're young and in good health, so then the premiums are not going to be very high. You don't need anything fancy in many cases. You may just need some term life, and again, for a young, healthy person, the premiums can be very, very inexpensive. So it's something well worth taking a look at, as part of your overall estate planning. Okay, next, digital assets. So the ownership of cryptocurrency and non-fungible tokens, probably much broader among younger people than they are among people my age. Now, the thing about digital assets, for especially those of you who deal with them, this, right? If you lose the login credentials to access a particular account or your digital wallet, there's pretty much no way to recover those. Okay, so if you pass away, okay, and maybe your family members know, hey, my brother, my sister had some Bitcoin, right, but it's in a wallet, we have no idea how to access it. They may never be able to get a hold of that asset, and what a shame. So within your will, you may want to document the URLs where the digital wallets, et cetera, or the, the exchanges where the digital assets are kept, or the apps on which, whether it's crypto.com or whatever. This is not an endorsement of that. It's just that one happened to be the first one I thought of. But the apps that you're using, and then what your login ID and password is. Okay. And by the way, if there's some kind of um, uh, uh, double what do they call it, double authentication, right, where you log in but then it sends some kind of code to your cell phone, you may also want to make sure that they have the code to unlock your cell phone so that when they go to log into that account, they can. Okay, so and by the way, this is another thing. It's not on the list here, but it's worth raising, and that is the login information for your social media accounts. Okay, if you want something done with them, it's a good idea to leave some instructions along with the information necessary to access them. And you could do it in the same way that you leave the information for your digital assets. Now, obviously, you want to be careful. You don't want this stuff just lying around where anyone can pick it up or and steal it from you. However, it can be put into a safe. If you have one at home, a fireproof safe would be best. It can be put in a safety deposit box. There are debates that go on whether safety deposit boxes are actually a good place to put information these days. But there are ways you can secure the information while making sure that if they need to, your executor, your heirs will have access to it. Okay, but keep in mind, digital assets are not like financial assets, like a brokerage account or something like that. They can be more difficult to access in the absence, or impossible in the absence of the access information. Okay, next, goals. So when you're in the early point of setting up your estate plan, one of the things you may want to think about is what are your goals for yourself and your estate going forward? Okay, and if you start documenting those, that'll make future estate planning easier. Okay, because you'll have a sense of the direction that you're going in, and especially if you're talking to your potential heirs or people who are helping you, if they have a sense of where you're going with things, that can be useful as in terms of making sure that your wishes get carried out at some point in the future when you're unable to do so yourself. So while not strictly part of an estate plan, figuring out the future, so to speak, I think it's, especially for if you're just starting out, it is something well worth taking the time to ponder, make some notes about, and make that information accessible to the people who you have appointed and or asked to help with these matters going forward. Okay, and then next is to do a periodic review. So no estate plan is good forever. Any estate plan is only good for a certain period of time, and that period of time that period of time lasts until something substantial changes. So if you have an estate plan and then one of these three things changes, you get a house, you get married, you have children, or somehow you have family members that you're responsible for. Maybe you have a younger sibling. Something happens and now you're responsible for that younger sibling. Okay, so if any of these things change, your estate plan probably has to change as well. So, for example, if you buy a house, at that point, it may very well make sense for you to create a living trust so that your house doesn't have to go through probate if you were to pass away. Okay, if you get married, now, presumably your spouse is going to be your primary heir, but not necessarily. But what is all that going to mean? Under the laws of intestate succession, which are the laws each state has about who gets the property of someone who dies without a will, without a trust, etc., spouse is usually a primary heir, but not necessarily 100% heir. Okay, so if you have children, your property may be divided between your spouse and your children according to the laws of intestate succession. Now, maybe that is what you want, fine. But what if those laws were to change, right? As they sometimes do. So once you have a spouse and or family members to whom you're responsible, then it's time to review your estate plan and make sure that it's up to date with your situation. And in any event, even if none of these big three issues have changed, you may change jobs, you may accumulate more wealth, and so it may just be that even though you don't have a house or a spouse or a family, you may have a big enough brokerage account, or you may have some other real estate assets, or maybe you've bought into a real estate investment on some kind of LLC or partnership basis or whatever. And so that might mean that you'd be better off having a trust of some kind rather than a will. So it is a good idea to periodically review. Do you have to do it once a year? Not necessarily. If nothing really has changed during the year, you may not need to review it. But you probably want to look at it every 2-3 years minimum, even if it doesn't seem like anything has changed. It's a good idea to take a look at it. Relationships may have changed. Your perspective on certain things may have changed. You may not realize, you may have forgotten what's in parts of your estate plan, and so it's worth taking another look. Even if in the end you don't change anything, it's time well spent. Okay, and then finally, you may want to get some professional help. Okay, now I mentioned in drawing up a will, you probably want to at least have a lawyer look it over, even if you drew it up yourself. That's a good idea to make sure that it complies with all the laws in your state. But you may also want some professional help in setting up beneficiaries, in setting up a healthcare directive, in establishing an attorney. In fact, all these other things, whether getting advice, whether you need life insurance or not, all of these are questions that a financial planning specialist, especially someone who is knowledgeable about estate planning, can help you with. An estate planning lawyer or a trust and estate lawyer can help you with many of these. And your accountant may, or an accountant may. You may want to find an accountant to help you with these things. So those are the three main professionals that would help you with your estate planning: a lawyer, an accountant, and a financial services professional. Those three, and they should have experience in estate planning in order for their advice to be most valuable. Okay, so it won't take you a lot of time. The number of decisions you'll have to make is going to be dependent on how many of these issues are of concern. But in any event, as I've said already a couple of times, it'll be time well spent, both for yourself as well as the people that you leave behind. Okay, if you have any questions, so these links will be in the show notes. So feel free, if it's a general question, post it in our social media. If it's an individual or personal question, you can always email me or send me a direct message. I'm happy to answer the question if I can. If it's something outside my scope of knowledge and practice, I'll be happy to refer you to someone who can. And I think we just have the legal stuff here, right? Yep, there we go. And we'll go ahead and close this off to wrap things up. So thanks very much for joining me. I hope you found this useful and informative. And so then tomorrow is at 10 a.m. Pacific time is business lessons from the military. And I'm trying to remember what the topic is. Oh, yes. So I'm going to be talking about a very famous World War II battle called Operation Market Garden. And you're like, why are you going to talk about a World War II battle? Well, I think there are some excellent business lessons that we can take from the failure of this operation to be successful. So please do join me tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific time. On Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, I'll be talking about the 4 questions that every entrepreneur must answer if they want to have a successful venture. Okay, again, that's on Wednesday at 10 a.m. And then 7 days from today, I'll be back for the next edition of Trusts and Estates Weekly. So I thank you very much for tuning in today. Wish you a wonderful rest of the day, and signing off as I always do. Marie, you're my belle. All the best, folks.